Marcus Chun stood at the bus terminal, his weathered hands clutching a small duffel bag. The autumn wind cut through his thin jacket as he stared at the departure board. Seattle to Portland. Gate 7. Departure in 20 minutes. After 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, he was finally going back to see his daughter. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Amanda. "Are you sure about this? Maybe you should call first." Marcus didn't reply. He couldn't explain to anyone, not even Amanda, why he had to do this in person. Why showing up unannounced was the only way he could face what he'd done. 3 years ago, Marcus had been a different man. He'd worked as a construction foreman in Portland, pulling double shifts to keep food on the table after his wife Jessica left. The divorce had been brutal not because of fighting, but because of silence. They'd simply grown into strangers living under the same roof. When Jessica moved to Los Angeles to pursue her dream of becoming a fashion designer, she'd taken 9-year-old Sophie with her. The custody agreement had been simple. Marcus got summer visitation and alternate holidays. It seemed reasonable at the time. What Marcus hadn't anticipated was the accident. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Marcus had been supervising a commercial building project when a scaffold collapsed. 3 workers were injured. Marcus, trying to help, had been struck by falling debris. The impact shattered his right leg and fractured his spine. The surgeries were expensive. The recovery was long. His insurance barely covered half the medical bills, and workers' compensation disputes dragged on for months. Marcus lost his job, then his apartment, then his dignity. He'd made a choice then, one that haunted him every single day since. Rather than let Sophie see him broken, homeless, sleeping on his sister's couch, Marcus had withdrawn. He'd stopped calling, stopped visiting, sent Jessica a brief message saying he needed time to sort things out and would be in touch when he was back on his feet. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. Now, at 42 years old, Marcus had finally clawed his way back to something resembling stability. He had a small apartment in Seattle, a job managing inventory at a warehouse, and enough money saved to make this trip. The question that kept him awake at night was simple and terrifying. Would Sophie even remember him? The bus ride took 4 hours. Marcus spent every minute of it rehearsing what he might say. "Sophie, I'm sorry." Too simple. "I never stopped thinking about you." Too hollow. "I was afraid you'd see me as a failure." Too honest. By the time the bus pulled into Portland's Union Station, Marcus had given up on finding the right words. He'd just have to trust his heart when the moment came. According to the address Amanda had managed to find, Jessica and Sophie lived in a neighborhood called Laurelhurst, an area Marcus vaguely remembered as being nice but not extravagant. He took 2 buses and walked the final 6 blocks, partly to save money, partly to delay the inevitable. The house was a modest 2-story craftsman with a small front yard. A bicycle with training wheels lay on its side near the porch. Not Sophie's, Marcus realized with a pang. She'd be 12 now, far too old for training wheels. His heart sank. Jessica had remarried. The bicycle probably belonged to a step-sibling. Sophie had a new family now, a complete family, one that didn't include a father who disappeared for 3 years. Marcus almost turned around right there. But then the front door opened, and his world stopped. Sophie stepped onto the porch, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. She'd grown, of course. That was expected. She was 12 now, taller, her features more defined. No longer the round-faced little girl he remembered. But it wasn't her height that made Marcus freeze. Sophie was thin, not naturally slender, but genuinely, worryingly thin. Her arms looked fragile, her cheeks hollow. She wore an oversized sweatshirt that hung off her frame like she was drowning in fabric. But that wasn't what stopped Marcus's heart. Sophie was bald. Completely, utterly bald. No hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes. Just smooth, pale skin where her beautiful dark curls used to be. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, unable to move, unable to breathe. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. His daughter, his little girl, looked like, "Can I help you?" The voice came from the doorway. A man, mid-30s, athletic build, stepped out behind Sophie and placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. I'm Sophie's father." Sophie's head snapped toward him. Her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes that were exactly like his own, went wide with shock. "Dad." The word was so quiet, so uncertain, that it shattered Marcus completely. "Sophie," he managed, taking a step forward. I came to see you." The man, the stepfather Marcus assumed, tensed. "Jessica didn't mention you were visiting. She doesn't know. I should have called. I should have." Marcus's eyes were locked on Sophie, on the changes that went so far beyond what he'd expected. "Sophie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Sophie just stared at him, her thin hand rising to touch her bald head in a self-conscious gesture that broke Marcus's heart into even smaller pieces. "I think you should leave," the man said firmly. "This isn't a good time." "Please," Marcus said, his voice cracking. 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to explain." "Dad." Jessica appeared in the doorway, and her expression cycled through shock, anger, and something that might have been pity in the span of 3 seconds. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I came to see Sophie." "Jessica, I know I don't deserve anything, but please, just a few minutes." Jessica looked at Sophie, then at the man beside her, then back at Marcus. Something passed across her face, something Marcus couldn't read. "Brian, take Sophie inside," she said quietly. "Jess, I don't think. Please." The man, Brian, nodded reluctantly and gently guided Sophie back through the door. Sophie looked back once, her expression a mixture of confusion and something that looked painfully like hope. The door closed, and Jessica stepped off the porch, crossing her arms. 3 years, Marcus. 3 years without a word. And you just show up. I know there's no excuse. Marcus struggled to find words. "After the accident, I couldn't work. I lost everything. I didn't want Sophie to see me like that. I thought if I just waited until I got back on my feet." "You disappeared," Jessica said, her voice hard. "You abandoned your daughter. Do you have any idea what that did to her?" "I can see something's wrong," Marcus said, his eyes drifting to the closed door. "Jessica, what happened to Sophie? Why is she?" Jessica's expression cracked, and Marcus saw tears forming. "She has cancer, Marcus. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She was diagnosed 18 months ago." The world tilted. Marcus felt his knees weaken. "Cancer? She's been through 3 rounds of chemotherapy. We're waiting to see if she's a candidate for a clinical trial at OHSU." Jessica's voice was steady, but tears were streaming down her face now. "She lost her hair. She's lost weight. She's been in and out of the hospital more times than I can count." "Oh God," Marcus whispered, his own vision blurring. "Oh God, Jessica. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "How could you know? You weren't here. You weren't answering calls or messages. Amanda said you were dealing with things and needed space. So we gave you space. Even when Sophie kept asking why you stopped loving her. That last sentence hit Marcus like a physical blow. I never stopped loving her. Not for 1 second. Then why weren't you here? Jessica's composure finally broke, and she was crying openly now. When she got diagnosed, she asked for you. When she was throwing up from the chemo, she wanted her dad. When they shaved her head before it all fell out anyway, she cried for you. And you weren't there. Marcus collapsed onto the curb, his head in his hands, sobbing. 3 years of held-back emotion. 3 years of loneliness and regret and self-loathing poured out of him. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting her from seeing me as a failure. I thought I was doing the right thing. Jessica sat down beside him, maintaining a careful distance. They sat in silence for a long moment, two broken people on a suburban curb in the fading afternoon light. What's her prognosis? Marcus finally asked, his voice hoarse. Cautiously optimistic. The cancers responded well to treatment, but it's aggressive. She needs constant monitoring. The clinical trial might be her best shot at long-term remission. Can I see her? Really see her, I mean, talk to her. Jessica was quiet for a long time. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please. You hurt her, Marcus. Badly. And she's so fragile right now, emotionally and physically. I don't know if she can handle. Mom. They both turned. Sophie was standing in the doorway, Brian hovering protectively behind her. Can I talk to Dad? Please. Jessica looked at Marcus, then at her daughter. Are you sure, honey? Sophie nodded, her hand self-consciously touching her bald head again. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like the video. Your comment means more than you think. It inspires me to keep creating stories that heal, teach, and move people. They sat in the backyard on a wooden bench beneath a maple tree that was just beginning to lose its leaves. Jessica and Brian watched from the kitchen window, ready to intervene if needed. For a long moment, neither Marcus nor Sophie spoke. Marcus studied his daughter's profile, trying to reconcile the vibrant 9-year-old in his memories with this fragile 12-year-old beside him. I like your head, he finally said softly. Sophie turned to him, surprise flickering across her face. Really? Really? You look like a warrior, like someone who's fighting a battle and refusing to back down. Sophie touched her head again, that self-conscious gesture. I cried for 3 days when my hair fell out. Mom tried to make it special, like a ceremony, but I just felt ugly. You're not ugly. You're beautiful. You've always been beautiful. Then why did you leave? The question was so direct, so painfully honest, that Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes again. I got hurt, Sophie. Really hurt. And I lost my job and my apartment, and I couldn't pay bills or take care of myself, let alone be the dad you deserved. I was sleeping on Aunt Amanda's couch, working odd jobs, barely scraping by. I didn't want you to see me like that. So you just stopped calling? I thought I was giving you space to be happy. I thought if you didn't see me struggling, you could just move on. Have a good life with your mom and eventually with Brian. Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing. When she spoke again, her voice was small. I thought you stopped loving me. Never, Marcus said fiercely, turning to face her fully. Not for 1 single second of 1 single day did I stop loving you. Every night, I'd lie awake thinking about you, wondering what you were doing, if you were happy, if you even remembered me. I was wrong, Sophie. so completely wrong. I should have been here. I should have been honest with you instead of disappearing. I got sick, Sophie said quietly. About a year and a half ago. I was tired all the time and I bruised really easily. Mom took me to the doctor, and they did tests, and then, she paused, her thin shoulders shaking. They said I had cancer, leukemia, and all I could think was that I wanted my dad. Marcus couldn't hold back anymore. He reached for Sophie, and she collapsed into his arms, both of them crying. He held her carefully, aware of how fragile she felt, how different from the solid, energetic child he remembered. I'm here now, he whispered into the space where her hair used to be. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I know I can't make up for lost time. But I'm here now, and I want to be part of your life again if you'll let me. Sophie pulled back, looking at him with those eyes that were so much like his own. Are you going to leave again? Never. I promise you, Sophie. Never again. People break promises. I know, and I broke the biggest promise a father can break. I wasn't there when you needed me, but I'm asking for a chance to prove that I've learned, that I'm different now, that I understand what really matters. Sophie studied him for a long moment, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. Cancer had aged her, Marcus realized, not just physically but emotionally. Okay, she finally said, but you have to promise one thing. Anything. Don't disappear because things are hard. If you're struggling, tell me. If you're scared, tell me. Just don't vanish again. I promise. I absolutely promise. They sat together on the bench as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. Sophie told him about her treatment, about the clinical trial they were hoping she'd qualify for, about the kids at school who'd been kind and the ones who'd been cruel. She told him about Brian, who was actually pretty cool even if he wasn't her real dad, and about her mom, who cried when she thought Sophie was asleep. Marcus told her about his job in Seattle, about the long recovery from his injuries, about Aunt Amanda who'd let him stay as long as he needed. He told her about the guilt that ate at him every day, about the regret that weighed on his shoulders. You look different, Sophie observed. Older. 3 years will do that, Marcus said with a sad smile. So do you. You grew up without me. I didn't want to, Sophie said quietly. I wanted you there for my 10th birthday, and my 11th, and my 12th. I know. I missed so much. I can't ever get that back. No, Sophie agreed. But maybe we can start over. Not completely, but kind of. I'd like that very much. As darkness fell, Jessica called from the back door. Sophie, you need to come in. You have medication to take. Sophie stood and Marcus stood with her. They walked to the door together, and before going inside, Sophie turned and hugged him one more time. Will you come back tomorrow? She asked. If your mom says it's okay. Mom! Sophie looked at Jessica with pleading eyes. Jessica met Marcus's gaze, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Tomorrow, Jessica agreed. But Marcus, we need to talk. Really talk. I know. And thank you for giving me this chance. Marcus stayed in Portland for 2 weeks, sleeping in a cheap motel and spending every possible moment with Sophie. He learned the rhythm of her new life. Morning medication, afternoon rest periods, twice-weekly checkups at the hospital. He learned that she loved audiobooks now because reading made her too tired. He learned that she'd developed a strange craving for pickles, a side effect of one of her medications. He learned that she was afraid of the dark in a way she'd never been before. He met with Jessica and Brian several times. Awkward conversations over coffee while Sophie was at school. Jessica was rightfully angry, but she was also fair. She explained that Sophie needed stability, that Marcus couldn't just drop in and out of her life anymore. "I'm not leaving," Marcus insisted during one of these meetings. "I'm putting in for a transfer to Portland. My warehouse has a location in Beaverton. I've already talked to my supervisor." Jessica looked surprised. "You're moving back?" "Sophie needs me, and I need to be where she is. I've got 3 years to make up for, and I'm not wasting another day." "What about your apartment in Seattle? Your life there?" "I don't have a life there. I have a job and a room. That's not a life. My life is wherever my daughter is." Brian, who'd been mostly quiet during these meetings, spoke up. "What if the treatment doesn't work? What if Sophie—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Then I'll be here," Marcus said firmly. "Whatever happens, I'll be here. That's non-negotiable." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. 3 years ago, I would have given anything to hear you say that. I know, and I can't change the past. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." The transfer came through faster than Marcus expected. Within 3 weeks, he'd moved to Portland, found a small one-bedroom apartment in southeast Portland, and established a visitation schedule with Jessica. Tuesdays and Thursdays after school, every other weekend, and one dinner each week as a group: Marcus, Sophie, Jessica, and Brian. It was unconventional, but it worked. Sophie's health became the center of everything. Marcus learned to recognize the signs of a good day versus a bad day. He learned which foods she could tolerate and which made her nauseous. He learned to give her space when she was irritable from pain and to provide comfort when she was scared. One Thursday evening, 6 weeks after his return, Sophie had a particularly bad reaction to her medication. Marcus was at Jessica's house when it happened, Sophie vomiting violently while Jessica tried to comfort her. "Should we take her to the hospital?" Marcus asked, feeling helpless. "Not yet," Jessica said, her voice strained. "This is normal after this particular drug. It should pass in an hour or 2. Marcus paced the hallway outside the bathroom, listening to his daughter's suffering, feeling more useless than he'd ever felt in his life. When Sophie finally emerged, pale and shaking, Marcus scooped her up, carried her to the couch, and held her while she cried. "I hate this," she sobbed. "I hate being sick. I hate the medicine. I hate losing my hair and being too tired to do anything fun. I know, sweetheart. I know. Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong?" "Nothing. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and it's not fair and it's not right, but it's not your fault." Sophie cried until she fell asleep in his arms. Marcus sat there for 3 hours, afraid to move and wake her, his arm going numb but refusing to let go. Jessica found them like that, covered them both with a blanket, and whispered, "Thank you for being here." In December, 3 months after Marcus's return, Sophie was accepted into the clinical trial at Oregon Health and Science University. The treatment was experimental, aggressive, and offered the best hope for long-term remission. The night before Sophie was scheduled to start the trial, Marcus, Jessica, Brian, and Sophie had dinner together at the house. It was a somber affair, everyone trying to act optimistic while fear lurked beneath every smile. After dinner, Sophie asked if she could talk to Marcus alone. They went to her room, walls covered with posters of bands Marcus didn't recognize and photos of friends whose names he was still learning. "I'm scared," Sophie said, sitting on her bed. Marcus sat beside her. "Me too. What if it doesn't work? What if I get sicker? Then we'll deal with it. Together. Your mom, Brian, me, Aunt Amanda, all the people who love you. You're not facing this alone." "But what if I die?" The question hung in the air, heavy and terrible. Marcus felt his throat close up, but he forced himself to answer honestly. "I don't think you will. I think you're strong and the doctors are brilliant and this treatment is going to work. But if the worst happens," he took a shaky breath, "then I'll make sure every day you have left is filled with so much love that it makes up for all the days I wasn't here." Sophie was crying now, and so was Marcus. He pulled her close, and they cried together. "I forgive you," Sophie said suddenly, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "For leaving. I forgive you." Marcus had to bite his lip to keep from completely falling apart. "Thank you. That means more than you'll ever know. But you have to forgive yourself too, because you keep looking at me like you're expecting me to tell you to leave. And I'm not going to. Ever." "How did you get so wise?" Marcus asked, managing a watery laugh. "Cancer makes you grow up fast. The treatment was brutal. Sophie spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and Marcus spent every moment he wasn't working in her room. He read to her when she was too tired to listen to audiobooks. He held her hand during the worst of the side effects. He learned to tell jokes that made her laugh even when she felt terrible. Jessica was there too, of course, and Brian when he could get away from work. The three adults developed an unexpected camaraderie, united by their love for Sophie and their determination to see her through this. One night, when Sophie was finally sleeping after a particularly rough day, Jessica and Marcus sat in the hospital cafeteria, both exhausted. "I was so angry at you," Jessica said suddenly, "when you disappeared. I thought you were selfish and cowardly." "I was," Marcus said. "I absolutely was. But watching you these past few months, seeing you with Sophie," Jessica paused, stirring her cold coffee. "You're not the same man I divorced." "No, I'm not. I learned the hard way what really matters. She loves you, you know. Even when she was angry at you, even when she felt abandoned, she loved you. I don't deserve her. Maybe not, but you're trying to earn it. That counts for something." They sat in companionable silence, two people who'd once loved each other, then grown apart, now connected by the most important thing either of them had ever created. On a Wednesday morning in February, Dr. Patel called them all into her office at OHSU. Sophie sat between Marcus and Jessica, holding both their hands. Brian stood behind them, his hand on Jessica's shoulder. "Sophie," Dr. Patel said, her smile genuine and warm, "your latest tests show no detectable cancer cells. You're in complete remission." The room erupted. Sophie burst into tears. Jessica screamed with joy. Brian laughed in relief. And Marcus, who'd been holding himself together through months of fear and uncertainty, finally allowed himself to hope. "It's early yet," Dr. Patel cautioned. "We'll need to monitor closely for the next 5 years. but this is the best outcome we could have hoped for." They celebrated that night at Sophie's favorite pizza place, a small restaurant called De Vivi where the staff knew them by name because they'd been there so many times during treatment. Sophie ordered her favorite, pepperoni and pineapple, a combination that made Marcus cringe but which he'd learned to appreciate because it made his daughter happy. "Speech," Brian called out, raising his soda glass. Sophie stood up, giggling but also serious. "I want to thank everyone who was there for me. Mom, who slept in my hospital room every night and never let me feel alone. Brian, who learned to make me laugh even when I felt awful. Aunt Amanda, who sent me care packages every week. And Dad." She looked at Marcus, her eyes shining. "Who came back when I needed him most and never left again." Marcus couldn't speak. He just raised his glass and nodded, tears streaming down his face for what felt like the 1,000th time in the past 6 months. Later that night, as Marcus walked Sophie to Jessica's car, she hugged him tightly. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "Even though it took you 3 years. I'm glad you finally came home." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Sophie Chen, now 14 years old, stood in front of the bathroom mirror and touched the short, dark curls that had finally grown back. They weren't as long as they'd been before, but they were hers, and they were healthy. She heard her dad's voice from downstairs. "Sophie, we're going to be late." She grabbed her backpack and ran down the stairs of Marcus's apartment, where she spent every Tuesday and Thursday night and every other weekend. "Sorry, I couldn't find my science project notes." Marcus smiled at her, his own hair showing more gray than it had 2 years ago, but his eyes brighter than they'd been in years. "Got everything?" "Yep, let's go." They drove to school together, chatting about Sophie's upcoming track meet. She joined the team this year, reveling in what her body could do now that she was healthy, about Marcus's recent promotion at work, about the camping trip they were planning for summer. "Hey, Dad," Sophie said as they pulled up to the school. "Yeah, thanks for coming back." Marcus looked at his daughter, this miraculous, resilient, beautiful person who'd forgiven him for his worst mistake and given him a second chance. "Thanks for letting me," he said softly. Sophie grinned, grabbed her backpack, and headed into school, where her friends were waiting. Marcus watched her go, this girl who'd survived cancer and abandonment and had come out stronger on the other side. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to Jessica. "Dropped her off. She's wearing the bracelet you got her." Jessica's reply came instantly. "She loves that thing. Dinner this Sunday? Brian wants to try that new barbecue place." "Sounds good. I'll bring dessert." Marcus put his phone away and started his drive to work. The Portland morning gray and drizzly but beautiful in its own way. He thought about that day 2 years ago when he'd stood on Jessica's sidewalk and seen his daughter for the first time in 3 years. The shock of seeing her sick, the guilt that had nearly crushed him, the fear that he'd waited too long. But Sophie had taught him something important. It's never too late to come home. Never too late to try again. Never too late to be the person you should have been all along. As Marcus drove through the morning traffic, he made the same promise he made every single day. He would never disappear again. He would never let fear or pride or shame keep him from the people he loved. Because sometimes, life gives you a second chance. And when it does, you don't waste it. You show up. You stay. You love fiercely and without reservation. You come home. And you never ever leave again.